You are watching Fox and Friends First. I'm Heather Childers.
And I'm Rob Schmidt. We were just learning that Representative Steve Scalise has been downgraded to critical condition and will need more surgeries after being shot in the hip.
And we have Fox News team coverage for you this morning. Jackie Ibanez diving more into the shooter's past, and Carly Shimkus with the reaction online.
Now let's get right, though, to Garrett Tenney live in the nation's capital. Garrett.
Well, Rob and Heather, this morning, at least 20 Republican lawmakers are counting their blessings and really lucky to be alive. They were just practicing their baseball for a baseball game yesterday morning when all of this unfolded. Shots began to ring out, and that is when lawmakers dove into the dugout to take cover. Several lawmakers, like Steve Scalise, though, were in the outfield. They had nowhere to go. He was shot in the hip. He started to crawl towards the outfield to get out of this raging gun battle that was underway. Witnesses said the shooting lasted for nearly 9 minutes and included as many as 50 to 60 gunshots before Capitol Hill police were able to take the shooter out. Here's how two congressmen described it.
We're all here by the grace of God, and I think a hand played in today because you look at the potential scenarios and outcomes, could have been a lot different.
Well, the situation's surreal in many ways. I've been in that type of environment before, and you just let your instincts kick in and go to work.
And later in the day on Capitol Hill, there was bipartisan praise for the Capitol Hill police officers who undoubtedly saved many lives, as well as calls for unity by party leaders.
We are united. We are united in our shock. We are united in our anguish. An attack on one of us is an attack on all of us.
To my colleagues, you're going to hear me say something you've never heard me say before. I identify myself with the remarks of the Speaker. We are not one caucus or the other in this House today.
And as you mentioned at the top, Steve Scalise remains in critical condition and he will need to undergo additional surgeries. The other shooting victims who remain in the hospital are Zach Barth, who is a congressional staffer, Matt Mika, who is a former staffer, and Capitol Hill police officer Crystal Griner, who was part of Scalise's security detail, and another officer, David Bailey, was also injured in yesterday's attacks, and he is being praised as well for continuing to engage the gunman even after he was injured. And they say he may have been the one that eventually took the shooter down and saved all of these lawmakers' lives. Robin, Heather.
All right.
Thank you to them.
That is something else. All right, Garrett, thanks so much.
Well, Congress, of course, coming together to praise the Capitol police officers who jumped into action to stop the shooter.
I know we want to give our thanks to the first responders and to the Alexandria Police Department who were on the scene in minutes. And I know this House wants to state unequivocally that we are, as ever, awed by the tremendous bravery of the Capitol Police.
These are the heroes that stopped the massacre of innocent women, men, women, and children in that park today.
The two officers, let's say their names again. Crystal Griner, David Bailey, thank you. They are assigned to protect Majority Whip Steve Scalise. Officer Griner was shot in the ankle and remains hospitalized in good condition. Officer David Bailey was also shot but was treated and released.
Well, the president and first lady making a surprise visit to Congressman Steve Scalise in the hospital. Carrying bouquets of white flowers, they spoke to doctors and sat at Scalise's bedside. The visit coming after President Trump condemned the attack as a brutal assault and thanked officers for their heroism in taking down that shooter.
We may have our differences, but we do well in times like these to remember that everyone who serves in our nation's capital is here because, above all, they love our country.
Now, the first family also visiting with one of the wounded heroes in this, Capitol Police Officer Crystal Griner, last night.
Well, new details about the shooter are being revealed as the people who actually knew James Hodgkinson react to the news of his horrific act of violence.
That's right. Jackie Ibanez has been looking into the gunman's past. She joins us now with more. Good morning, Jackie.
Good morning, Heather and Rob. Well, investigators quickly trying to piece together the background of James Hodgkinson. Until March, he was a retired home inspector living in Belleville, Illinois with his wife. A neighbor describes him as an angry little man. In 2006, he punched a woman in the face and then dragged her daughter down by her hair. He also hit a man with the butt of a shotgun and fired it in anger. A friend says he had a temper, but nothing like this.
I mean, he was in a few fights and stuff like that, but nothing that would demonstrate violence as far as what he did.
What do you mean by that, like fights with people?
Well, he'd never back down from anybody. In a bar fight or whatever, he stood his ground.
Political social media posts showing Hodgkinson became deeply troubled by the presidential election. In one of the posts, he writes, quote, "Trump is a traitor. Trump has destroyed our democracy. It's time to destroy Trump and company." Hodgkinson volunteered for Bernie Sanders' campaign. Sanders immediately addressing that on the Senate floor. Listen.
I am sickened by this despicable act, and let me be as clear as I can be. Violence of any kind is unacceptable in our society, and I condemn this action in the strongest possible terms.
Now, once in Virginia, he lived in his car and he hung around the YMCA where he was seen just before the shooting. Hodgkinson also became a regular at a barbecue restaurant, we're told, near the baseball field. Staff says he was rude but never mentioned politics. The New York Times reports the gunman called his wife on the day before the shooting to tell her he was coming home because he missed her and his dogs. Robin, Heather, back to you.
Well, that's very interesting. Okay, Jackie, thank you so much.
Thanks.
Democrats and Republicans coming together, vowing to take the field tonight in honor of Republican Steve Scalise. House Speaker Paul Ryan drawing tremendous applause after saying that the game will go on.
Knowing Steve Scalise, as we all do, he is likely really frustrated that he's not going to be able to play in the baseball game.
Well, both Republican and Democrat lawmakers relaying the same message on Tucker Carlson last night.
That's very interesting.
We have to play that baseball game tomorrow and let these people know that they just can't change the way we live in this country.
I do think it's very important that we go out there, show solidarity, show that we're together on this, and have a good time playing America's pastime.
Well, everybody playing in today's congressional baseball game will wear LSU gear. That is in honor of Steve Scalise.
So we now know that the shooter is a man with a history of angry politics and run-ins with the law.
So what can law enforcement officials find out about the gunman's motives from his political rants? Joining us now is the sheriff of Suffolk County in New York, Long Island, Vincent DeMarco. Thank you so much, Sheriff, for coming on this morning.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you see when you look at some of the things that we've been able to find out about this shooter? Do you see a lot of hints that this might have been coming?
Yes, I think it's pretty obvious when you look at his social media posts, and after speaking to his neighbors and some people from his hometown, I think we see that this is a man who was on the edge of mental stability and mental illness, and you never know what's really going to push somebody over that edge. But the rhetoric coming out of Washington, and when you have somebody like Kathy Griffin, who is championing his cause, showing an act of violence, that quite possibly could have pushed him over the edge.
And when they look at his social media accounts, they'll also take a look at his phone history, who he's been calling for possible accomplices.
Yes, no doubt. I'm sure they're going to look at his emails, his phone, see who he's calling, and they also want to see, was somebody else involved in this? Did he call somebody right before this happened? Was there a bigger plan, and this was just happened to be an opportunity that presented itself right in front of him at that time? He might have just happened onto that baseball field when the practice happened. Was there a bigger plan? Why did he move to Alexandria? Why was he living as a homeless person? Why didn't his wife, she doesn't seem to show any concern that he just left town in March and been living out of a van in Alexandria.
Yeah.
Do you think this, do you see a common thread where it seems like these people that just go off the deep end and do stuff like this, they always kind of seem to be lost souls? This guy living out of his car, the shooter of the 5 police officers in Dallas from, I believe, last year. You kind of start seeing a common thread that these people don't find a place in society.
Yes, I mean, listen, we have a lot of people in this country who are mentally ill or on the edge of mental illness. And when you have people, figures, political figures, talking about violence. And in 2015 and 2016, we saw a 56% increase in ambushes on police officers because there was, it almost became accepted and people were encouraging violence against police. There was a false narrative out there. And I think you're seeing the same thing here.
Well, the 57th annual congressional baseball game will take place tonight as scheduled. First pitch, I think, is like 7 p.m. It is a charity event. What will the security be be like at tonight's event?
Well, I think it's going to be the safest place in the country tonight. This is a game that I think everybody in the Washington area knew about, but now it's almost a national event. Everybody knows about it. So you're going to see more security, not just because of what happened yesterday, but also because everybody knows about this game now. It is well publicized, which is good for the charity, but it does present security issues, and I think you're going to see some very intense security outside the stadium as well as inside the stadium.
Yeah, very reactionary. What is your message to politicians out there to take a lesson from this?
Yeah, definitely. Listen, there's a line, and every time you cross that line, someone's going to cross the next line. So we have to tone it down.
All right.
All right. Well, Sheriff, thank you so much for coming on this morning. We do appreciate it.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Okay.
Simply said, tone it down.
Yeah,
good advice.
Absolutely. All right. 5:09 here on the East Coast. A disturbing rise in vicious left-wing hate targeting the president and being spewed by a number of left-wingers across the country.
I have thought an awful lot about blowing up the White House.
Well, does yesterday's violence come as a surprise? Amy Holmes joins us with that coming up next.
And reaction is pouring in online. The messages of support now coming in from all across the country.
Into reports of a possible dirty bomb on board a container ship in South Carolina. Investigators just clearing the port of Charleston after finding no credible threat at this time. The area evacuated after a YouTube conspiracy theorist made a claim about explosives on board a ship that just got back from the Middle East. That person has now been detained for questioning. Also, another sad story this morning, the death toll in that London apartment building inferno climbing to 12. It is expected to get higher as well, as several people do remain missing. Investigators say they have no idea how many people could have been in there more than 24 hours after the high-rise burst into flames, leaving a number of people trapped inside. One woman desperate to get her baby to safety. Listen to this, wrapping it in a blanket, dropping the child out of a 10th floor window into the arms of somebody below who made the catch, and the baby survived. We don't know about mom. The cause of the fire still unknown, but some people now blaming a faulty refrigerator. Heather.
Well, a disturbing rise in vicious left-wing hate targeting the president being spewed all across the country by liberals.
I have thought an awful lot about blowing up the White House.
Well, I'd like to punch him in the face.
We are here to be nasty.
Wow. Well, given this kind of rhetoric, does yesterday's violence targeting Republicans come as a surprise? Here to weigh in, Rasmussen Reports political analyst Amy Holmes. Amy, thank you for joining us this morning.
Good morning, Heather.
Important to point off at the start that we're hearing this rhetoric from both sides of the aisle. I mean, it's been coming down since the election started, months and months ago.
Well, political language can get hot and it can get passionate, and we accept that when it comes to political discourse. But it is crossing the line, Heather. And so another clip you could have added to that montage is our former vice presidential candidate, Senator Tim Kaine from Virginia, saying only days after the president's inauguration that Democrats need to fight in the streets. I mean, he was talking about, physical violent action against the president, and apparently his son took his advice because his son was arrested for some of his political activity. Well, he probably wasn't
actually talking about people physically going out in the streets and fighting.
Well, he had a whole long list of things. We need to fight this way, we need to fight that way, we also need to fight in the streets.
And that's what people have been talking about. This dangerous rhetoric. One of the congressmen called it rhetorical terrorism, and how people need to think about the words that they use, like fight or die, or
absolutely,
because there are some people that are in a different state of mind that take that seriously.
Well, there are some people like yesterday's shooter who are, I would say evil and had evil intent, obviously, and has to take responsibility. Well, he's dead, so he's taken responsibility in a certain sense for what he had to do. But then there's this other form of political violence that we've seen on college campuses, for example. My cousin is a student at Evergreen State College, and she actually signed an open letter by students that were opposing this violent bullying tactics being perpetrated by some of her fellow students. And she's a liberal, Heather. She doesn't regard herself as a conservative, but she said, hey, this is crossing the line, it's gone too far. And it's been reported to me that there was a student at Evergreen who was even advocating, it's shocking, who was even advocating rape as a way to punish political enemies.
I mean, People don't realize the power of their words, whether they mean it or not. Let's take a look at this Trump. This is from Donald Trump Jr. He said events like today are exactly why we took issue with New York elites glorifying the assassination of our president. And he's right, because you also have to think about the family members.
Oh, absolutely. And we know that Barron Trump was, of course, extremely upset when he saw these images on television. And I think we need to think about the broader political discourse. And the New York Times, I mean, let's point out the hypocrisy of the New York Times, that they went after Sarah Palin for having a target in one of her political ads and saying that this led to the attack on Gabby Giffords. But now the New York Times is sponsoring Shakespeare in the Park that depicts the murder, the assassination of a stand-in for President Trump.
But how do we still protect our rights as individuals? I mean, our artistic rights. You have to use common sense, but not everyone has the same common sense. That's the thing. You would think that would be the wrong thing to do, but people have a right to do it if they want.
Certainly, I think there's a difference between having the right to do something and being responsible. Okay. And Kathy Griffith, for example, she's paying the price. She took the photo, she posted it, she initially was quite proud of it, and now she's paying a professional price for that.
So our response can hopefully keep control of some of the rhetoric that's happening.
Well, I'm not saying that we necessarily need to control it, but we certainly can react, and we can react with our dollars, and we can react with our feet.
Gotcha. All right, Amy, thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate it as always. Rob?
All right, ladies, thanks. 5:18 now on the East Coast, less than 24 hours after the shooting. Democrats already using the attack on Republicans to push their gun control narrative.
What do you do about the millions of these rifles in this country?
Access to high-capacity weapons.
That's a Democratic New York City councilman trying to go head-to-head with Tucker Carlson. We'll show you how that went. Also, solemn calls for unity from both sides of the aisle this morning. Republican Congresswoman Marsha Blackburn joins us to react.
Back with a Fox News alert for you. Virginia Governor Terry McAuliffe calling for stricter gun control shortly after the congressional baseball shooting. But the Democrat quickly found himself misquoting some facts.
I have long advocated, this is not what today is about, but there are too many guns on the street. We lose 93 million Americans a day to gun violence.
Can you confirm there's only one shooter?
93 individuals a day.
Obviously, he misspoke. McAuliffe also questioned why he brought up gun control in the first place after he said that it wasn't the day to do that.
But McAuliffe was not the only Democrat to talk gun control in the wake of this. New York City Council member Jumaine Williams sending out a press release attacking our current gun laws in this country just hours after the shooting. And Tucker Carlson last night questioned why.
What gun law would have prevented the shooting today? I'm going to try for a fifth time, then I'm going to completely give up. Because what you're doing is you're steering the conversation to the general, when I would like to bring it back to a very specific thing.
It has to be brought to a general, because this is not about one incident.
Because you don't have a real answer. That's
no.
Well, there you have it. Williams says it's time for the country to push back against the NRA. Tucker refuting these claims, saying Williams' timing was wrong to send out that release.
Well, the reaction to the congressional baseball shooting is now pouring in online.
That's right. Carly Shimkus here now from Fox News, Sirius XM 115, as lawmakers on both sides of the aisle are calling for unity. Carly.
That's right. Lawmakers are doing just that. They're calling for unity in the wake of the shooting in Alexandria, Virginia. An outpouring of prayers can be seen across social media, with President Trump setting the tone, calling Congressman Scalise a true friend and patriot in a tweet shortly after news broke. Now, the president and first lady spent the evening visiting the congressman in the hospital, and he later took to Twitter with an update, writing, "Just left hospital. Congressman Steve Scalise, one of the truly great people, is in very tough shape, but he is a real fighter. Pray for Steve." Now, the shooting took place while House Republicans were practicing for today's congressional baseball game. A photo shows House Democrats reacting to the terrifying news by bowing their heads in prayer. And House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi echoed that sentiment on Twitter, writing, "On days like today, there are no Democrats or Republicans, only Americans united in thoughts for the wounded." The two Capitol Police officers who were injured while engaging with the gunman are being hailed as heroes across social media. Arizona Congressman Jeff Flake tweeting, "Just met with Capitol Police officers Crystal Griner and David Bailey at the hospital. Thank them for saving my life." And Congressman Roger Williams, who suffered an ankle injury, also praised Capitol Police, writing, "I would like to take the time to express my sincere gratitude to Capitol Capitol Police officers who were at practice today. He then called them true heroes. Now, despite the shooting, the congressional baseball game will take place later today, and House Speaker Paul Ryan drew tremendous applause when he announced the game will go on. Heather, Rob, back to you.
All right. Carly, thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.
Carly.
All right, 25 minutes after the hour and stories of heroism as Capitol Police really stepped up to save Representative Steve Scalise and his colleagues.
There could have easily been 25 deaths or more today. The thin blue line held today.
Our continuing coverage with complete analysis continues live up next. You are watching Fox and Friends First. A Fox News alert for you. Congressman Steve Scalise is now in critical condition after being shot by a Trump-hating gunman who opened fire on Republicans at baseball practice.
President Trump and First Lady Melania visiting his bedside at a Washington, D.C. hospital as we learn brand new details about this politically motivated attack.
You are watching Fox and Friends First. I'm Heather Childers.
And I'm Rob Schmidt. We have live team coverage this morning. Doug Luzader live at Nationals Ballpark where that shooting took place, where the game tonight will take place. But we begin with Garrett Tenney live at Statuary Hall in Capitol Hill with breaking details this morning. Garrett.
Well, Heather and Rob, after spending the entire day yesterday at this baseball field where this happened, I can tell you it truly is a miracle that no one besides the shooter was killed. There was one way in and out from this baseball field, and this was as lawmakers were wrapping up their practice. Several were out in the field with nowhere to hide when these gunshots broke out. Police say the shooter, 66-year-old James Hodgkinson, had a rifle and a pistol that he used over the course of about 9 minutes, firing as many as 50 shots, according to witnesses. House Majority Whip Steve Scalise was near second base when he was shot in the hip, and as other lawmakers dove into the dugout to take cover, Scalise tried to crawl into the outfield to escape the gunfire. Here's how one congressman, Brad Wenstrup, described it.
He was very calculated. He used the third base dugout as protection. He used another building as protection. And he was calculated, and he was herding us into one spot.
Wenstrup, a former Army medic, and several others rushed over to Scalise after Capitol Hill police took the shooter out and used a belt for a tourniquet around his leg. While investigators have not determined a motive, several of the Republican lawmakers have said they believe they may have been targeted because just a few minutes before the shooting began, the gunman walked up to them and asked if the players were Democrats or Republicans.
A gentleman walked up and approached us, and he said, hey, are those Republicans or Democrats out there? And Jeff said, they're Republicans. So the guy immediately turned around and then started walking to the field. Now, this was a little odd. There'd be no reason to really be a spectator at this.
And as you mentioned, Steve Scalise remains in critical condition, but will likely need several more surgeries for his injuries. 3 other shooting victims are still in the hospital as well. Zach Barth, who is a congressional staffer, Matt Mika, who is a former staffer, and Capitol Hill police officer Crystal Griner, who was there as part of the security detail that Scalise receives as the majority whip. And we've heard from a number of lawmakers who were there that if it weren't for Scalise's security detail, things would have been much, much worse. Heather and Rob.
It certainly appears so. Garrett, thank you so much.
Thank you. Well, Republicans and Democrats showing solidarity with a standing ovation vowing to play that congressional baseball game tonight as scheduled.
That's right. Both parties refusing to let the violence stop this century-old tradition. Doug Luzader live from Nationals Ballpark where that game will be held tonight. Doug.
Rob and Heather, good morning. Yeah, this is a big event in any year, but especially this year. Now, there was some speculation that maybe this game would be canceled because of yesterday's attack. It will go on as planned, with Republicans and Democrats really stressing here that while they may face one another on the field, they ultimately play in the same team.
We need to play that baseball game tomorrow and let these people know that they just can't change the way we live in this country.
I do think it's very important that we go out there, show solidarity, show that we're together on this, and have a good time playing America's pastime.
All right, Republicans, though, will miss the services of Steve Scalise, who was set to play second base. And this is a guy who is a baseball fanatic. He hands out commemorative bats on Capitol Hill. House Speaker Paul Ryan talked a little bit about this yesterday.
Knowing Steve Scalise, as we all do, He is likely really frustrated that he's not going to be able to play in the baseball game.
Yeah, and look, beyond anything else, beyond the symbolism, this is kind of a competitive series, and it is tied up. 39 wins apiece. So this could be a decisive game tonight. Rob and Heather, back to you guys.
Certainly will. All right, hopefully everybody has a good time. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
All right, the Capitol police officers who took down the shooter now hailed as heroes. Congressman Roger Williams was on the field when shots rang out. He says without those brave officers, things could have ended much differently.
There could have easily been 25 deaths or more today. The thin blue line held today.
39 wins.
And law enforcement officers everywhere should be proud. And Americans everywhere should be thankful that this is still the kind of country that still produces these kinds of heroes.
All right, one of Williams' staffers, Zach Barth, was shot as well, but is expected to be okay.
Yeah, there were some initial reports that Congressman Williams himself had been shot, which were wrong.
It was confusing there in the beginning, yeah.
Well, the president and first lady are making a surprise visit to Congressman Steve Scalise in the hospital, carrying bouquets of white flowers. They spoke with the doctors. They sat at Scalise's bedside to visit with his family. And the visit coming after President Trump condemned the attack as a brutal assault, and he thanked the officers for their heroism in taking down that shooter.
We may have our differences, but we do well in times like these to remember that everyone who serves in our nation's capital is here because, above all, they love our country.
The First Family also visiting with one of those wounded heroes, Capitol Police Officer Crystal Griner, last night.
Well, the targeted attack on Republican lawmakers coming after a string of anti-President Trump stunts, some violent, in the media and even inside some American classrooms.
Yeah, Fox News radio host Todd Starnes joins us now with his take. Good morning, Todd.
Good morning, Heather. And what I'm about to say is politically incorrect, but it needs to be said. Our great nation is teetering on the brink of political and cultural anarchy, and the blame lies with Hollywood and public universities and the far left. The hateful rhetoric has given birth to bloodshed, this time at the hands of a man who hated President Trump, a man who wanted to kill as many Republicans as he could. Good people gunned down because of their political affiliation. Make no mistake, the man who pulled the trigger bears the responsibility for the bloodshed. But we would be foolish if we did not address the festering anti-Trump cancer that has infected the left. The D-list comedian who beheaded the president, the high school teachers who pretended to assassinate the commander-in-chief, the professor who said Republicans must be executed, and the other professor who said the president must hang, and the other professor who said House Republicans should be lined up and shot. On Wednesday, those professors nearly got their wish when a baseball field nearly became a killing field. We can be better than that, America. We must be better than that. Back to you.
Absolutely, 100% right. Thank you, Todd.
Todd, thanks.
Well, the time now is about 20 minutes until the top of the hour, and solemn calls for unity after Congressman Steve Scalise is shot in a politically motivated attack.
We are strongest when we are unified and when we work together for the common good.
Also, from celebrities threatening to blow up the White House to calling for the president's assassination. When will the rhetoric in this country stop? A fair and balanced debate with Chuck Rocha and Lawrence Jones coming up next.
Welcome back to Fox and Friends First. Brand new overnight. North Korea says that they released this man right here, this American student, Otto Warmbier, on humanitarian grounds. The 22-year-old now hospitalized in a coma in Cincinnati after spending 17 months as a prisoner in the rogue nation. This brand new picture showing him moments after touching down in the U.S. Two men you can see holding him up, carrying him to an ambulance. We are expected to learn some more about Warmbier's condition at a press conference later this morning. And tensions rising after a dangerous encounter overseas. An Iranian warship shining a spotlight and a laser at a U.S. military helicopter in the Strait of Hormuz, around that area. The chopper accompanying the USS Bataan and the USS Cole and a cargo ship when the Iranian vessel pulled alongside the ships in international waters. The Iranians coming within 800 feet of the Bataan before sailing away. The Navy calling the incident, quote, unsafe and unprofessional.
All right, calls for unity from leadership on both sides of the aisle after yesterday's shooting.
I ask each of you to join me, to resolve, to come together, to lift each other up, and to show the country, to show the world that we are one house.
We will use this occasion as one that brings us together and not separates us further.
We are strongest when we are unified and when we work together for the common good.
The question is, will the far left answer those calls with everything that we have seen from riots on college campuses to so-called art depicting the death of our president, the beheading of our president? Many now asking, where is the civility in politics? Joining us now, Lawrence Jones, host for The Blaze, and Democratic strategist and former Bernie Sanders advisor, Chuck Rocha. Thanks, guys, for coming on this morning. We do appreciate it. Chuck, I'm going to start with you. I'm going to ask you guys the same question, too. Is it going to take something like this to get people to dial this down? A congressman being shot while playing baseball to dial down some of this extreme rhetoric that we have in this country right now?
You know, I detest everything that happened yesterday, and I echo Bernie's statement. But, you know, I'm in the arena. I do political campaigns for a living, and nothing more disgusts me than what happened yesterday. And I hope, and I think about it, you know, when I pray on Sunday, I want things like this for us to be able to come together and not talk. I disagree with Republicans. Let me say this. I'm kind of worked up this morning. Yeah. I disagree with Republicans on everything that they stand for on policy. But I have some really good friends who are good, decent human beings. The majority of them, all of them are. But we should not be inciting violence against fellow Americans, no matter what our political differences are. And we should be able to have a civil debate about this without somebody getting shot on a baseball field.
Yeah, and Lawrence, over to you. What do you think? Is this what it takes for the wake-up call?
You know what, I echo Chuck's sentiment, but I don't think this is going to be the wake-up call. I think this will be something temporary, and then people will go back to their own corners, and there will be continued divide. I mean, even last night, and I'm a little upset about the media, how last night we have a sitting congressman in critical condition, and they want to cover FBI leaks. Why is the FBI leaking in the first place? Why are they leaking when a member of Congress is in critical condition, and why is the media covering it when we're supposed to be unified? Yeah. And so I don't think this is going to happen.
Chuck, over to you real quick. You know, I can't help but wonder, and I want to know your opinion on this. Are politicians to blame for a lot of this? Because they hype up so much rhetoric, so much anger, trying to inspire people to get to the polls and vote. They have to be so dramatic, and they have to make it seem like the world's going to end if you don't elect me congressman or if you don't elect me president. And I think that you can inspire some crazy people to do stuff like this when you talk so big.
I think there's a little bit of blame that goes to all elected officials who would take the extreme right or the extreme left of either one of the issues. But what you have out there since Citizens United is you have these echo chambers on social media, nonprofits, or other political organizations who feel like they can go much more to the right or the left to any politician who really put out fake news, who put out false articles, really trying to gin up the base to show up to vote or to be active. And that's exactly the kind of culture that creates what happens yesterday with getting people so moved up that that's what happens.
And Lawrence, over to you. I mean, you use words. They use words like resist right now. The left is using resist, which to me sounds a lot like revolt or revolution, which, you know, as we've seen in the past in Europe, those can be bloody. They can be deadly.
Right. And I think there's a difference from people having a policy debate versus emotional arguments, calling people racist, saying they're xenophobic, saying resist, saying impeach. I mean, these are all rhetoric and words to get people riled up. I think it's okay and it's healthy in America to have these strong policy debates, but we're not seeing that from the left right now.
Yeah. Over to you, Chuck. You know, there was such a major swing in this country. We went from 8 years of President Obama to an election where everybody thought Hillary Clinton was going to continue moving, you know, that direction and on that same page. And then all of a sudden, somebody like President Trump comes in, just polar opposite of somebody like President Obama. Is that a big part of why there is so much anger and why people are just so disillusioned right now?
There's not one answer to that question, but it's a number of things. One is the 24-hour news cycle. A lot of it is social media. And a lot of it is a lot of average Americans are sick and tired of being sick and tired, and they're very, very frustrated to what Lawrence said. There's a way to be a emotional. I'm emotional. Lauren's emotional. There's a lot of people who are emotional, but we can have these debates about policy and talk about it in a way that doesn't get somebody killed.
Absolutely. Lawrence, a quick word from you, just a last word.
Well, I just think there's a clear difference in the way President Obama was covered. During when he was president, it was hope and change. There were parades. There were people even accepting his victory for historic reasons. And I think right now the tone is much different with Donald Trump being in office. And I think that's shameful.
Absolutely. Chuck, Lawrence, thanks so much for coming on this morning. We do appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, when we come back, Congressman Marsha Blackburn will join us live to talk a little bit more about all this.
That's right. We'll be right back.